Here are 12 clues that you need to know to spot clutter early in your ADHD home. The first clue is that you have things in your home that you just don't have a place for. You have them, they're there, they're in a random place. You put them because you couldn't figure out, does it go here? Does it go on this shelf? Does it go in this room? You have no idea where it goes. And so you just have it in your home. Say you went out and bought a lava lamp, right? And you're like, hey, the lava lamp's cool, has different colors and everything. You get it home, you don't have a place for it. You don't have a place to where it goes with all the other lamps. You don't have a place in any room where you can actually set it because there's just not space there. And it just kind of sits over in a corner. You may not even take it out of the box, sits over in a corner in a room somewhere, and now it just becomes clutter. Or maybe you have bought a beanbag chair and you thought, wow, this would be really good. You get it home and you just can't find a place that you feel like it goes with the rest of your house, right? It's just like in a corner somewhere. It's taking up that space, but you just don't have a particular place for it. You keep moving it around and eventually you just stop moving it because you're like, okay, I'm done. I don't have a place for this, but I don't know where else to put it. So I'll just set it here and then get to it later. And then what happens is this keeps happening. You keep buying things or getting things you don't have a place for. And then eventually all those things start to become clutter. And then you have to go through the process of decluttering those things because you know that you didn't have a place for them in the first place or couldn't find one. And so you want to prevent this when you start getting things that you don't have a place for. You need to think about, do I want to keep this thing or do I want to get rid of it? And the next thing is you start putting things behind other things to make them fit. For example, you have a shelf, you have things spread out nicely on the shelf and neat on there, and you can see everything visually. That is really important for ADHD. You want to make sure that you have everything visual in front of you, easily seen. Now, what happens is you now have this shelf and you notice there's some space behind the things you have there. And so you say, I have an idea. I can take some other stuff and put some more stuff on that shelf and put it behind the things that I have in front. Now, there's two issues with this. Now you're starting to fill up that shelf space even more. And so it starts to get feeling like it's cluttered as you see things in front. Now you're seeing things behind, and it just looks like it's really no more space there at all. The other thing is the things in front are now hiding the things behind them. And so you're not sure what is behind them just looking over in that section. You may have known what was in there when you started to put those things in there, but say you're like 3 months, 4 months down the road, you're looking for something, and then you're like, I wonder if it's behind this thing you don't know. And so you have to go back there, look, see if it's back there, pull things out to check and make sure it's a thing that you need. And you may not even find the thing that you need. It may be somewhere else. And so in all of this, it makes that shelf look really cluttered. And so you don't want to get to that point to where you're putting things behind other things. You want to decide, okay, this is what it needs to go on that shelf. This is what has to go on that shelf to make it look like it's okay and organized. And then when you start trying to put things behind other things to make it fit back there, you want to make sure that you really think about that and then make the decision, is this really a good idea for me to do this? Or do I need to think about, are the things in the front the things I actually want on the shelf? Or can I move some of those things to somewhere else and then put these new things there? Or do I need to put these things I'm thinking about putting on that same shelf to somewhere else to have them nicely spaced out and keep them visual as well? And here's the other thing. With ADHD, you might have a tendency to lose things a lot of the time. This makes it even easier to lose things because now you can't see them. And so this is really important that you keep everything visual and you don't put things behind other things, because you do not want to have issues trying to find something if you really actually need it. And the next thing is all the unfinished projects that you might have in your home. You start a project, you were excited, you just had a plan, you were going to finish it, you're going to do it by this time. And then you got kind of busy and then you thought, I'll stop for a minute and then I'll come back and finish it later. And that project has just remained unfinished for months or years. And this is a really common occurrence with ADHD because you do get started on something, you want to finish it, you get really interested in it, and then you stop and say, I don't really want to do that anymore. I want to do this other thing. I'm more interested in this other thing. And that project gets left to not be finished at any certain time. And then you may never get reinterested in that project and come back to finish it. Those projects that you never finish become clutter in your home. if you never go back to them, if you just leave them in a corner, leave them in a room, and they're just there and you have not gone back to finish it, these things all become clutter. And so you don't want to get into the habit of, hey, I didn't finish this project, I'm going to come back to it later. If it gets to be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks and the time keeps going and you haven't gone back to that project yet, you may want to think about getting rid of it, throwing it out, finishing it. And if it has been an extended amount of time, maybe a month, and you just haven't gone back and finished that thing, and you were still thinking about, okay, I will go back and finish it sometime, at the point to where it's a month or 2 months, you need to really start thinking about, am I really going to go back and finish this project? Or is it time to go ahead and get rid of it and get it out of your house so you can use that space for something else, so it's not clutter in your home for the next few months or even the next few years? You want to be aware, you want to keep an eye on all of those unfinished projects and then make a decision much earlier so it does not become constant clutter in your home. And the next thing is what I call procrastination of donation. That means you have things that you put in a box or wrapped in a bag and they are all ready for you to take to the place to donate them. But you leave it in your car, you leave it by the door, you never actually take it to that place, even though you know that you need to, even though you say to yourself a lot of times, I need to go take that to wherever to make sure it's donated. You just never do. You pass it by and you just think about it, and then you just get interested in something else. And these things might sit in your closet or by the door for weeks and months, or in your car for the same amount of time, and you just don't get to the place to where you take it to the donation place, even though that is your goal. Or you might even do this: you leave the house to go do that and you get distracted by something else, and then you go to the store or to your friend's house, to wherever you go, to these different places, and then you get all the way back home and realize, I was supposed to go to that place and you never did. And so now you're like, well, I don't want to go back out and go to that place again, I'll just do it tomorrow. And then that creates a cycle to where this stuff is just in your house or in your car or in your closet for weeks on end. And when that happens, all of those things become clutter because they take up space, and you know that you need to get rid of them, but they just sit in this little area or wherever. And now they are just not an item to donate. They're now clutter that you actually need to donate. And so you need to eventually just get rid of them before they become an issue. And the next thing is all of the things you buy impulsively. You had to have this thing. It's cool. It's shiny. You just knew that it would help you in this area or that area. And so you bought it, you got it home, and then you realize, I really don't need this. It doesn't do what I thought it would. It doesn't go the place I thought it would. It doesn't fit anywhere. And you have all of this stuff that you have bought in that way in your home. And the reason you probably haven't returned it, because you probably forgot about the time you needed to have it within the return date. Like maybe the return date was 2 weeks and you ended up not deciding until 3 weeks, and now you're stuck with it because you can't return it. And so all of this stuff ends up in your home and you're not sure what to do with it. Even if you liked everything that you bought, like you bought all this stuff and you just perfect at buying impulsive stuff, right? Even if you liked everything that you bought, what happens is you're still bringing in stuff into your home. And the other thing is you're not getting rid of stuff out of your home. Each thing that you bring inside your home takes up space. And so the more things you bring inside your home without getting rid of something else, then eventually your home is going to be cluttered with things you don't want or don't need, or new things that you really like, but now you just don't have space for it all. So now you got to decide, okay, do I want to keep the new things, or do I want to get rid of something else because of the fact I don't have space for all of this stuff? So in either instance, you're going to have things that make your house more cluttered up, whether it's something you like or something that's new and now you just don't have space for it. Your home becomes cluttered in either situation. And the next thing is whether you buy or end up somehow with a duplicate of something you already have. Say you're like, you're at the store, you want to buy something, you remember, hey, I need this specific thing, maybe, a microwave, or maybe, the special cooking utensil, whatever. You need that thing, you know that you need it, you remembered, I need to have one, I gotta have one, so I'm gonna go ahead and buy one because this is a really good price. You get it home, and then you realize you bought one last week And now you have another one that you're not gonna use, but then you think, and I'll keep it. If this one wears out or whatever, I'll just use this one. This will be a good thing to do. What happens with that is that maybe that thing that you have initially, the new one that you bought, not the duplicate, lasts for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years. And now you have just another one of these things that you're not using for that time. And so that thing, the duplicate, becomes clutter because of the fact that it's just sitting, taking up space, and then you're just never using it, never moving it out of the place that you put it. Maybe you put it, in a room or your garage or whatever, and you just don't even think about it until that time that you actually need it 9 years down the road. Or the other thing is, you don't use it for such a long time that once that one that you're using goes out or breaks or whatever, you go and buy a new one and then get home and end up finding the duplicate like 2 months or 3 months later, and then realize you already had one. And so now you have again the issue of two. And so the thing is, you want to make sure and double check a lot of times. If you need something, you might want to check and make sure you don't have one at home already. If it's something you're like, hey, I really need this, I was intending to buy one. And overall, a good practice is make sure that if you're going to buy something, you don't have a duplicate already at home. Or if you bought something and came home and realized you already had one, make sure that you go ahead and return it, and don't just keep it and put it in a place where it can become clutter. You want to prevent this by not keeping duplicates around if you're not going to use them. And the next thing is, don't accept free stuff that you do not need or that you're not going to use. For example, your friend has a pasta maker and they're like, hey, do you want this pasta maker? And you're like, I think I would use that. Maybe, not sure. But you're like, hey, it's free, I'll take it. Great. And so you get it home and you put it in your kitchen and it sits on the counter, and you don't know how to make pasta. And you never really think about making pasta anytime over the next 4 or 5 years. And it just sits there and takes up space. And you're just not really interested of going through the process of actually learning how to make pasta. You never have been. And so what happens is that thing is now clutter because it's just taking up space in your home and it's not being used for anything. You're not really thinking about using it for anything. And now your friend's clutter that they gave you, that free thing they gave you, probably because it was clutter in their house, is now clutter in your house. And so what you want to do is, when somebody asks you if you want something free and you're not going to use it, in that situation, you need to just say no. And sometimes with ADHD, I know it's hard to say no because you don't want to just feel like, hey, I'm saying no to a person, rejecting their gift or whatever. In this case, when you know that you're just not going to use something, go ahead and get used to saying, no, no, thank you, I don't need that. This is another thing also, like when you go to restaurants or wherever else you want to go to, they give out cups and frisbees and bags and koozies and all this stuff. All of that stuff is fun to get when you're there at that party or a restaurant or whatever. But when you get home, a lot of that stuff ends up again being clutter in your home. It was free. It was nice to get at the time, the excitement of the event or anything. But when you get home, if you do get those things, you might want to go ahead and throw those things away if you know that you're not going to use them, because koozies and cups might end up just all over your apartment or taking up space in your cabinet that you're not going to use. All those things might just be things you're never going to use. And the next thing is appliances you never use or don't intend to use that take up space on your counter. Look around your kitchen and see, are there any things here that I don't use at all, that I have that I might want to get rid of? For example, you might have an espresso machine and you just have it because you think, okay, I like coffee, maybe I like espresso. And you have this machine and it's been there for 2 or 3 years and you've never used it. You like coffee, you make coffee all the time, but you just never make espresso at all. It just sits there and takes up space. And at that point, when you've had it for so long, you might want to think about getting rid of it, whether you give it away or sell it or whatever, but it's just taking up space in your kitchen on the counter. And now you don't have space for something else you might actually want to use. Or maybe you just have something else you want to have in that space and you can't because you have an espresso machine there. So what you want to do is you want to make sure to figure out which appliances are taking up space that you do not use at all, or you have not thought about using at all, or you just know that, hey, I was interested at that one time, but I'm not going to use it at any time anymore. All of those kind of things, you want to make sure that you get them out or get rid of them some way out of your kitchen to make space for the things you actually want to use, you actually need for your kitchen. And the next thing is all of the broken things that you're just holding on to just because you might fix them one day or are thinking about fixing them, or you're just like, hey, I don't want to throw that away. It was good at one time. I just want to hold on to it for a little bit longer because who knows, I might need it in a certain situation. And at that time, I'll fix it. And so all those things in your house or apartment that you have that are broken, you might want to think about getting rid of them if you have had them for an extended period of time because of the fact they still all take up space you could be using for something else. And when you haven't fixed them for a long time or haven't gotten any attention to them for a long time, they just become clutter and they might take up space in your living room, family room, garage, whatever place it's in. And you can't, if you have to move your apartment around, move furniture around, you have to move it around that thing that's just there in the way. And so what you want to do is if you have something that's broken, you want to make sure that, am I really going to actually fix this? And it might be just that time for you to say, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of this, throw it away, whatever. And then if I really need a thing that I am throwing away, I'll go buy a new one that actually works, that's functional. Or you might have already bought a new one and this is just the one that you've been hanging on to because you figure, I have an extra one, I fix this one. Then if that's the case, you also need to think about going ahead and get rid of it. And the next thing is get rid of all of your old tech. For example, you have a VCR, you don't have VHS tapes, you don't know why you're still holding on to it, you just are. You don't know, you might be thinking about, okay, maybe VHS tapes will come back one day, but you don't really need that VCR. You don't really need your old cell phones either. Like if the cell phone company doesn't support the cell phone anymore, you can't get parts for it. They won't send you another one at this point because the phone is just so old. And I've been in that situation. My old phone that I had was so old when I talked to the people and said, I have this phone. I need to make sure it's working right, whatever. They kind of gave me a funny look because the phone was so old at that point. And so I actually got a new one now. So I'm up to date. But the point is, I could have thrown that phone away a long time ago. So if you are just holding on to things that are just old that you're not going to use anymore, that's just an old kind of tech that that it's just not anything that's needed anymore, you want to go ahead and get rid of that. Now, one of the things I would say that's old tech that you might want to keep a hold of is record players because they do still sell records in different places and shops. But the point is, that's an example of old tech that is good to keep. As opposed to some of this stuff, you can just really get rid of it. You don't need it because it does become clutter. If you have a lot of old tech just lying around and you're not doing an antique store or something, then it might just be time to go through and figure out which stuff you're never going to use again and get rid of that stuff. And the next thing is, do not start a junk drawer because of the fact that everything random that you find ends up in the junk drawer. You might be looking around your house or apartment and find something and be like, I have no idea what this goes to. I'll just throw it in the junk drawer. Or you find something and you're like, you know what? I actually know what this goes to, but I don't have it right now. So, to make sure I know where it is, I'll put it in the junk drawer. And so all this random stuff ends up in your junk drawer. And now it's just one big drawer of clutter. And eventually you're going to have to go through your junk drawer and clean it out somehow and try to make heads or tails of what's in there. And then figure out, do you actually need all the stuff that's in there? And what do you need to throw away? What do you need to keep? And so it just creates this issue of a drawer that's nothing but clutter. And the other thing about it is your junk drawer might be so full that it has so much stuff in there that you might not be able to get the drawer open because you just kind of stuff stuff all the way down in there and figuring, hey, I'll just get to it later. And you don't realize it's too full to pull the drawer out. And that's been a situation I've encountered a few times. So you want to make sure that you don't get in that situation either, because that's going to just frustrate you. And then you know that you have a lot of stuff in your junk drawer that you have to go through and figure out what is what. And so it's just better if you don't even have a junk drawer, if you can avoid it. And the next thing is, do not bring in junk mail into your home, or if you do, make sure that you get rid of it right away, because what happens is you get junk mail in with your other mail, and it's like, hey, do this, get millions, do this, coupon for this, or this service is really new, you need to try this. And all the stuff that you have that you don't care about, right? You're just like, hey, I don't care about any of this stuff, I just want my actual mail that's important. And you end up putting this stuff on a table or a desk or whatever, or maybe even on your bed or a chair. And each day you get more and more into your home, and it becomes a small pile to a big pile to a huge pile of junk mail that you have to go through, and might be covering other things that you actually need, might be having bills inside in between all the junk mail that you just can't find that you actually need to make sure that you pay. It's just clutter because you don't need it in the first place. And so the best thing to do is have a trash can right by the door. You come in, you look at all through your mail, and you find all the junk mail and just throw it in there so it doesn't end up all spread out around your house or apartment. Just the fact that you're able to look someplace and find something quickly because junk mail is not covering it. Now, this is not the only video that I have on making sure that you have a clutter-free space. I also actually have a video on creating space in your ADHD home. If you have too much stuff in your ADHD home, this will help you find a way to create more space there so that you can put other things, important things that you need inside your home, and then also make sure that you're not keeping the things you don't need inside your home. This is a great video, and you can watch that right here.